Good evening, all, and welcome to this presentation in partnership with Theater Or and Tattered Cover. This is Sisters-in-Law, the webinar series. My name is Alan Frosch. I am the co-owner and chief community officer here at Tattered Cover Bookstore in Denver, Colorado. It is a pleasure to welcome you tonight to this very exciting program. We are very excited for the content of this 5-part series between now and the middle of October. And it is my pleasure to now introduce the artistic director of Theater Or, Diane Gilboa. Diane.
Thank you, Alan. For those of you who are not familiar with Theater Or is the Hebrew word for light. So we're a theater of light. We're a small nonprofit. We do not have a subscription base, and we concentrate on 1 or 2 projects a year. We've been concentrating on Sisters-in-Law for the past year and a half, postponed twice because of the pandemic, and hopefully we're opening September 25th. A little overview of the series first. This whole series was designed in conjunction with the Colorado premiere of the play Sisters-in-Law as community outreach. And the first topic tonight is the art of the play. Then we're going to have getting to know Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, hopefully a little personal glimpse into their lives. Then we'll focus on the legal decisions, legacy, their accomplishments, what it means for them to have served on the court. And finally, we'll go into legal reform. The program for today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the source of this project, how the playwright got involved. And then we're going to move to an artistic discussion with the playwright and our director. And then our director, Amy Feinberg, will introduce some of the artists to help give you a glimpse into the background of what makes up this play and how we get to production. This play is on a journey, and we're very excited that Denver is one of the stops on this journey. But there have been a couple of stops before, and I predict there are going to be many more stops afterwards. And to introduce our first guest, who is Elizabeth Weber, I wanted to let you know that she's an experienced producer, business advisor, and advocate for the arts. She has been the top young rock and roll manager, twice Billboard Manager of the Year, and has produced creative stage shows at major venues and concert halls across the world, including Carnegie Hall, Madison Square Garden, Hollywood Bowl, Kennedy Center, London's Royal Albert Hall, a number of places. She's been enthusiastic about the role of cultural performance to empower the voices of the unheard and less heard, and alert to the power of new technologies to advance the art forms. But before I introduce her, I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors, because you audience members would not be here without them. Our sponsors are Tierney Lawrence LLC, Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck LLP, Universal Lending Corporation, the League of Women Voters, Boulder Jewish Community Center, Mizell Arts and Culture Center at the J, the Colorado Bar Association, the Denver Bar Association, the Colorado Women's Bar Association Foundation, Gibson Dunn, the National Council of Jewish Women, Colorado Attorneys for the Arts, and the University of Denver Sturm College of Law. And I hope I didn't forget anybody. But I just wanted to show you how this is a real community project, and the community has really gotten behind this project and the webinar series. And now, Elizabeth, take us back to the source.
Well, I'd be happy to do that. And I'd like to say that life is wonderful, and you really never know, if you just open your mind and your heart and you stay curious, where it will take you. And little did I know all those years ago, when I used to spend a lot of delays at the old Stapleton Airport, we would take a cab into Denver and we'd hang out at the Tattered Cover. And we could spend hours there. I never cared how long the delay was, because we could buy books, we'd send them back to Wyoming, we'd send them to New York. And I never imagined that I would be on a program that is being sponsored by the Tattered Cover. So there you go. I would like to tell you in all candor that this is the first play I ever produced. And I never told anybody that in the beginning. I never told Jonathan that. But I never really figured it would be that hard because I've been an impresario since I was 6 years old. I organized my neighborhood. I organized everything. And while I had many talents, no one ever really told me when I was very young that having this talent to organize and to have a vision and to realize it, no one ever told me that was a job. So I thought for a long time I'd go into genetic research. And then I had other ideas of things that I was going to do. I've always been an advocate for the underserved, people that don't have voices. But I got dragged into rock and roll. And it's funny how life is because my experience in rock and roll my brother was a musician, and I learned how to read contracts when I was 15 years old. And I would advise him. I don't know what I advised him about, but evidently it worked. And before I knew it, I had some major clients, not at 15. That didn't happen until my early 20s. And I really learned that if you could run a business, if you could run a home, eventually I had a child, that you could really do anything you wanted to. And maybe I used to run big rock tours. I worked with Billy Joel, Phoebe Snow. I did some work with Wings Over America. And that transitioned into doing other projects. I learned the video medium. And because I felt like I couldn't be hiring video crews to work with, and it was a new art form, if I didn't know what it cost, if I didn't know how to do it myself. And so that was, that's part of the road to Sisters-in-Law. And as I continue to enjoy, I love my life. I love my life as a producer. I've traveled all over the world. I work with interesting people, and a lot of people want me to tell them, oh, what is this star like? And what's that star like? It's like, oh, I don't really know, because that isn't who I worked with. I worked with the people like Diane Gilboa, who had an idea too, and relentlessly found me. I was in the middle of the desert on a hike, and I answered the phone, and I'm like, it's Joshua Tree, and I'm trying to commune with nature, but Diane was not going to let me go. And I thought about it, and I thought, this is a perfect place for Sisters-in-Law to be, with somebody who is as interested in it as I am. And I decided that I didn't want to travel anymore. This is 2016. It was February. I had already been in France. I've been in Paris, London. I'd been in New York. I've been in Bergen, Norway, and I'd been in Muscat, Oman. I was there as a guest of the Sultan, and we were performing at the Opera House. And I was just up to here, because even if you stay in the best hotels, that's not so much fun. And so I went back to Paris, where at the time I had an office, and I saw the dirt in the streets and the refugees, and I saw all these horrible things, and it was just like America. And I thought that I needed to go home. I needed to go back to the United States and figure out something I could do. And I could do to help alleviate the stress I saw the world in. Because what was happening in Paris, what was happening anywhere that I traveled, was exactly the same. And all the people that I worked with were the workers, the people that earned a salary, that voted, that were concerned about their children. They were concerned about how they were going to inculcate in them, good values. And so I got back to America, and I knew that this book, Sisters-in-Law, was coming out. I had an acquaintance with Linda Hirschman, and I got the book the day it came out, and then I went up to Big Sur, where there's no telephone signals, there's no internet, and I read the book in a few days, and I loved it. I mean, I loved it for reasons because I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I I liked to read more about how the Supreme Court was really working, and how it was working during the days of Sandra and when Ruth came on. And then when I got down south enough, I checked my messages, and I had a message from Linda Hirschman. And I called her, and Linda said, would I be willing to help her do something in television with her book? And the first thing I thought of, shucks, I'm going to have to read it again. And for those of you who know, it's a dense book. But I thought about it, and I thought that the story of these two women and the fact that they were so different. I mean, I don't know if you could find two people as different as Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I thought that if they could learn to work together to do things for the common good, that people should hear that story, that people should, and no one was going to read that book. I could tell you that for a fact. There's nerds like me who read it, but most people wouldn't. And I thought that a very accessible way would be to have a play. And so now none of this happens quickly. When I started this project, I had dark brown hair, but plays take a very long time to develop, as most creative projects do, because that's how you want it to be. You want it to be something that people care about and change and massage, and they perform it, and you hear the words and then you change them. So I was lucky enough to get an appointment with Jonathan Shapiro. And I had tried to get in touch with many, many women, writers, directors, producers, and they all pretty much had the same, they would listen, the ones who would get on the phone with me. And they'd say, well, just keep me posted and let me know how you're doing. It's not right for me just now, but. So I get this meeting with Jonathan Shapiro, and I go to this completely adorable historic lot in Hollywood where Jonathan had an office. And he was the showrunner and writer for Goliath, which was taping on a soundstage right across the alley. And I came upstairs to Jonathan's office, and Jonathan looked at me, and he took my hand in both of his, and he said, "Thank you for thinking of me. I'm humbled that you would think that and trust this project to me." And from that day to this, Jonathan has been steadfast. And although he may not be a woman, he's my woman, because he was. He's never wavered, never faltered. He has rewritten, he's done anything anyone could ever expect of him. And I'm grateful. And before I turn this over back to Diane so she can introduce Jonathan, I just want to say that when I left the meeting and I'm walking through the lot, and it was so fantastic, I had to tell someone. So I called my son, who has a big business. And, for all you mothers out there, you usually don't call your son in the middle of a work day and say, "I've got to talk to you." So, and I asked my son if he could have a few minutes, and he said, "Yeah, sure." And I said, "I have to tell you, I just had the greatest meeting of my life. That never did a meeting go so well." And he goes, "Gee, that's really nice, Mom." He said, "But don't give up your day job." And I said, "No, I won't. I said, "But I had to tell you right now, because I'm sure he's on the phone with his agent and saying, 'Don't ever let that woman near me again.'" And here we are.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now I'm going to introduce Jonathan Shapiro, who is not only the playwright, but he's a film writer, film and television writer, and he's also an attorney. And I know that some of you are familiar with his legal dramas, including HBO's The Undoing, Amazon Prime's Goliath, created with David Kelly, an Emmy, Peabody, and Humanitas Award winner. The other television credits he has include NBC Peacock's Mr. Mercedes, NBC's The Blacklist, Justice, Life, and The Firm, ABC's Boston Legal, The Practice, and Big Sky. Yes, we wonder how that's going to end. Also, he has been.
I wonder about that too sometimes. But anyway, I'm
yes,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
He has been an adjunct law professor at the UCLA School of Law. And prior to becoming a writer, he practiced law for 10 years as an honors program trial attorney in the US Department of Justice Criminal Division and as an assistant US attorney for the Central District of California. He earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees in history from Harvard and was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University. And Sisters in Law, as Elizabeth said, is his first play. So Jonathan, I want to ask you, when Elizabeth really called you, what did you think?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, and I will answer that, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. I feel that this is one of the greatest work experiences of my life because it's given me the chance to be incredibly grateful for some tremendous women who have been steadfast in trying to get this production forward. And Diane has been such a champion of this. I can't thank her enough, but I have to thank Elizabeth Weber for being an absolute tremendous character. If Elizabeth Weber didn't exist, some writer would have to create her. She is a force of nature. And when it's funny, she says that she feared that I would call my agent and say, don't let that woman near me. In fact, I had never told my agent that we had the meeting, because if I had, he would have said, for God's sake, don't write theater. There's no money in it. So the Yiddish word that I would, if I may, I could say it's Latin, but it's Yiddish. This whole production is a testament to the concept of beshert, the idea that things are meant to be. My first job as a 15-year-old was writing and researching for an organization called the Center for Civic Education. And the only reason I got the job was because it was about a mile from my house and it was easy to get to, and they needed somebody. And it was through that job as a 15-year-old that I met Sandra Day O'Connor for the first time. And it just so happened through a series of twists and turns, I was asked by the National Association of Women Judges in 2014 to write and produce a film explaining what the judiciary does that could be used by judges who are being recalled by the Koch brothers and others who are trying to change the nature of the judiciary, in large part in an effort to get Roe v. Wade overturned. And I have to tell you, as I sit here now in 2021, I apologize for the noise. I am at a secure location. I'm at a secret location that involves Ohio State playing Minnesota in a football game just on the other side of this wall. But at any rate, I was able to get to know Sandra Day O'Connor, to make a film with her that ultimately did win an Emmy, and to see her a number of times and to get to know her family. And then I got a phone call from Elizabeth Weber saying, would you be interested in being involved in trying to adapt the Linda Hirschman book into a play? I can only blame and thank God for that, for those circumstances, because who would have thought it? I was a federal prosecutor for 10 years. I was a writer. I've been a writer now for 21 years, writing primarily legal television. Well, I guess it's all legal television, but writing about law. I must say, I did get a half-hour comedy on the air on NBC. You don't know it because it was canceled so fast that the flowers that my agent sent me were still alive after the show had been killed. So I did tell Elizabeth, it's true, that I thought that these two women deserved to play and that it would be best for a woman to write it. And we ended the meeting, as I recall, with me hoping that Elizabeth would find a great woman to do it. For whatever reason, as Elizabeth said, that didn't happen. And so I kind of faced an interesting dilemma that I had never faced as a writer before, which is I had a strong sense that a play based on sisters-in-law would be a heavy lift because it's a dense book. And I want to just take a moment and suggest to the people listening to this to put yourself in the writer's position. A play is about 90 minutes long. The lives of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor are the lives of two of what I believe are the greatest American heroes of the last 60 years. The book Sisters-in-Law covers their entire lives. How would you as a writer take that book and those lives and distill it into a 90-minute dramatic event that would give the audience a sense of who these women were and make the audience care about them and relate to them as human beings, even if the members of the audience know nothing about them and maybe may not know anything about the Supreme Court? That was the challenge of this play. And I have to say, there are easier plays to write. And my next play is going to be easier, no matter what it is. But this has been a wonderful experience. And one of the great gifts of this project has been to be able to meet the O'Connor family, to meet people who clerked for both women, to meet lawyers who were mentored by them, to study them. And I have to say, I love them more as individuals. I love them more now than when I started. I think they're far more complicated than the thumbnail sketch that I think they've often been reduced to, the caricatures that they've been reduced to. And I desperately hope that this play continues to get the attention that it has received. It's had successful runs. As I've said to Diane, no matter what happens to the play, I will never be more grateful for a production than I am for the Theater Or production. Because despite a pandemic that shut down all live theater, Diane and everyone involved has stayed with it because they believe that this is an important cultural event for the community of Denver. And it means an awful lot to me that they've put so much effort into it. And I'll just conclude because I can go on and on. You know, both justices worked to bring freedom to women in Afghanistan, judges in Afghanistan, lawyers were women in Afghanistan. Both women believed Roe v. Wade was a terrible decision, but they both also believed that the right to abortion ought to be one that is sacrosanct for women. As we sit here now today, the play and the lives of these two women has never been more relevant or timely. And so I am humbled to be involved in this, and it's been a joy to work with the women directors we've had, the wonderful actors, and I'm just really excited to continue on this journey. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. We're not quite done with you. I'm going to introduce Amy, our director, and then we're going to have a conversation with you and Amy about the stage we're in right now. But Amy, if you want to turn on your video, your picture now, I'm going to introduce you, our wonderful director, Amy Feinberg. She is a freelance director, a master teacher, and a producer now in Boulder. She has focused a great deal of her career on new play development, and she's done premiere productions all around the country. She created and headed the Directing, Playwriting, and Production program at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia from 2004 to 12, and was the producing artistic director of the Hypothetical Theater Company in New York City from 1982 to 2008. And she's currently working with other playwrights in development with a number of other plays. And you may, if you lived in New York, have seen the Ellis Island stories, because she wrote, directed, and produced those stories, which were in residence at the Ellis Island Immigration Museum from 1992 to 2000, and now tours nationally to schools, festivals, and libraries. She has an MFA in directing and is a proud member of the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, Actors Equity, and the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers. Amy, are you there?
I am here.
You are here. So I want to ask you to start off, when I approached you with this project, why did you say yes? Why did you want to direct Sisters-in-Law?
I can't imagine somebody not wanting to direct Sisters-in-Law. One, just because of the characters involved in, and the impact that they've had on, American society, as well as, the world in so many ways. And as a theater practitioner, what I came to learn through the play is the effect that they had on one another over those years, which is, about arc. It is terrific storytelling, and how to do that. And I agree with Jonathan that it's heavy lifting to try to do that with a bunch of cases and facts and opinions, and yet I think that the relationship between fact and meaning and message is really what theater does best. And that's actually been the conversation that I think Jonathan and I have been having over the past several months, to find the best way to tell this story through the magic of theater.
So tell me, okay, you've got the assignment and you're reading the script and you've got some questions. Tell us about what your first conversation was like with Jonathan. I mean, he never heard of theater, or he didn't know you. So how did this begin?
Well, I'll ask Jonathan to join me in the memory of the times that we've, at least when we first started speaking to now. First and foremost, I consider working on premiere productions, or productions that will be seen in a particular area, whether it's a world premiere, or regional premiere, or New York premiere, a slightly different art form than directing a revision of a play that's already been produced and known. And I've really built a career out of working with writers. I love it. I'm not even sure what I would do in the first week of rehearsal if I didn't have the playwright working alongside me. I've had those experiences, but I prefer a comrade in the playwright. And when I first read the play, I was excited, and I was scared, or at least intimidated by the amount of material that there was to cover in a short amount of time, and some inherent pitfalls that a play based on a book about these two iconic women and their accomplishments based on historic fact, and how to have them portray those facts without sitting down and just having a conversation. I mean, that would be, death in the theater, is sitting down and just talking. Theater exists because because characters have things they want from one another. They have things that they do to get those things that they want. It creates conflict and hopefully behavior that I call stage-worthy behavior. And so, you know, my first set of questions to Jonathan had to do with that, and how to actively tell the story in a way that would convey who they would become to one another, not just to the world, and not just, you know, we had already had a couple of documentaries on these women, and you know, and I'm sure Jonathan, probably most people would agree with me, you know, documentary is certainly best done through film, through, you know, and factual material that you can actually show people. And I don't think theater is the place to do that sort of work. Theater is a place where you humanize things, where you empathize with people. And it's not necessarily about just learning facts. It's actually about understanding from the inside out what it was like to be the first and second, what it was like to be extraordinary in ways that only, you know, a very, you know, fraction of an amount of a 1% could ever get to. These were the, you know, probably the most powerful women in modern history. And so, so that kind of what began my conversations with Jonathan. Do you remember things differently?
No,
I'm big at asking questions, and so I think now it's a bit like, here are the questions that I have, and we kind of went from there. Jonathan.
Yeah, no, this gives me a chance to just say that it's been a complete joy to work with Amy, and you know, in television, every episode of television involves about 140 people, 80 of whom's only job is to take care of the lighting. So it's been a real intense and wonderful collaboration with Amy, because like all intelligent people, she asks great questions and is reluctant to give answers. The second thing I want to say is I covered law for 3 years as a newspaper reporter before I became a lawyer. And I think that's given me a bit of a gimlet-eyed view of lawyers and law professors and judges. Only lawyers and law professors can take an exciting story and make it boring. My fear with writing this play was that it would turn into great moments with Mr. Lincoln, which, as you recall, if you've been to Disneyland, is a animatronic version of our greatest president. I wanted to write a love story about two women who were individually great characters. One is tall, one is short, one is blonde, one is brunette, one's a Jew, one is a Christian, one's from the East, one's from the West. That does not make a play. What makes a play in the classic Greek sense is circumstance, fate, the fact that these two women should be alive at the same time and end up on the Supreme Court. And what made, to me, and what Amy and I talk about, is what makes it drama is the choices that they made. The choice they made to give each other the respect to cooperate and collaborate and to listen. And the reason why this is such an important play, by the way, Minnesota just scored, in case you're wondering, the reason why this is such an important play at such an important time is because what we're all desperate for as Americans is for cooperation, collaboration to get something good done. And what we're all lacking is the ability to listen. And what I think is tragic about these two women, without giving away too much, is what's inspiring about these two women is they acted in ways that men on the court never had and haven't since. And the tragedy is that they didn't continue on that course. The last thing I'll say about that Amy Feinberg, who is terrific, if I haven't made that clear, is she proves to me something I've always felt is true, and I'm not the first person to say it. Art is the lie that tells the truth. Theater is the lie that tells the truth. The documentary is the truth, but it doesn't convey the reality of the truth of the souls of these two women in the way that we're trying to with this play. And those are the questions Amy asked. And I'll finally conclude by saying, because I'm mercurial and have the temperament of Donald Duck, there are times when Amy will ask me a question so many times it'll drive me crazy. But it is always in service of making the play better. And that's why I think she's great. By the way, Amy, you aren't you relatively close to a famous playwright in your personal life?
Am I relatively close to a playwright in my personal life? I don't know. Who are you talking about? What are you saying?
Well, when you're in Los Angeles, you stay with.
Oh yeah, well, I most of my friends in LA are writers of some sort.
Right.
So many, a lot of people who couldn't, rub two nickels together in New York are working in film and television out there now, and the theater misses them. But I'm really happy and pleased, and you have, I will say this, Jonathan, spoiled me forever because you are. Maybe it's because you've written your first play, but you say yes so often in a way that if I hear no, I'm gonna be like, what are you talking about? I'm sorry, did you say no? And I so appreciate it. I also, try to be somewhat economical in my, in my ask, but certainly not in my questioning, because sometimes the answer isn't a rewrite, sometimes it's literally giving me a real answer. I put that in because blah, blah, blah. And it's a dramaturgical class.
Let me also add, since we're near the high holidays, my favorite show business story that will explain why I've loved the theater experience so much. The first show that I ever created that got on the air, and by the way, it's very hard to create a show that gets on the air. I just want to be clear about that. Very hard. 10 out of every 100 pitches get sold, and 1 out of every pitch becomes a pilot, and 1 out of every 10 pilots become. It's very hard, is what I'm trying to say. And so I got my first show on the air, and starred Don Johnson, of all people, who is not Jewish, by the way. And the show was canceled, and I was distraught. And it's very public to have your show canceled. And I went to high holiday services, Rosh Hashanah, for comfort with my family. And during the holiest moment of Erev Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi walks by me and says, I heard the show was canceled. I don't understand. The numbers were getting better. And I want you to know, I did not convert at that moment, but I was feeling very badly. And I went home, and my mother, God bless her, was at high holidays with my brother. My brother had custody of my parents that year. And she said, Johnny, I wish you had been at services at the temple we were at. I was thinking about you the whole time because the rabbi's sermon was about failure.
Right.
This is why I'm sitting outside my therapist's office, clearly. Anyway, Amy Feinberg appreciates those kinds of stories, and that's why I love working with her.
Amy, could you just, for our audience, the first week of rehearsals was something called table work, and it was table work with Jonathan. But I don't know that the audience knows that term. Can you tell us what table work with the playwright is, or even without the playwright? Explain it for them.
Sure. And I'll say table work is what I'll say is it's my jam. It's the thing that I insist on. And most directors' process starts off either with just it's something as short as a day where they read the play and they talk about the play. Sometimes it's a few days and they talk about the play. And they become smarter about the play. and they're able to answer some questions about the character that they will be playing. I spend about 25% of rehearsal time, what I call at the table. And I call it table work as opposed to table talk, right? Because I insist that the actors start working in first person, talking to one another immediately. And so within minutes, we are that much closer to opening night, that moment. And we're working under the text, subtextually, to define what it is that we want from one another and what it is we're doing to each other to get what it is that we want. And the difference of working at the table with the playwright are a couple of things. One is we don't have to guess on the intellectual stuff. I can always turn to Jonathan and go, yeah, what there are 3 raps of a gavel mean something different than 1 rap of a gavel, instead of like trying to, go do a research paper on that, we can just get the answer and move on. But also to be able to say, right here, it felt like we were onto something, and then we stopped and told a story here. And I'm wondering if that's sidetracking what it is that we're doing right here, and is there a better place to tell that story? Those sorts of questions. And Jonathan is great at answering some of those things right away. His instincts are so good. And usually within a few minutes, or certainly by the time we take a break, he's like, here's your new lines. And it's because he's right there. It's because we experienced the same thing at that moment, and being able to stop and pose a question there. And so that's really what table work for me is. It usually takes, about a week or so. It's been a great process with these actors. So.
To tell everybody too that this table work was all on Zoom, right? We had the playwright with us on Zoom. And when we began
yes, we were at the table live, and he zoomed in from LA.
Zoomed in. And we also cast this on Zoom during the pandemic. And we've had our actresses remain with us this whole time. So Amy, I'm going to turn this over to you right now and let you introduce some of the artists that are making up the Denver production of Sisters-in-Law.
Great. So let me just first describe a little bit of the play production process. And so, usually you're working on the play, sometimes with the playwright, if you're lucky, and it's being drafted, and then you're hiring your designers, and you're starting to speak to them about how you're seeing the play, and what's occurring to you about the story, and about the messaging, and about the lie that tells the truth. And so we hired our set designer, lighting designer, sound designer, our stage managers, and our costume designer, and started to have meetings. And I presented at the time my conceptual thoughts with them, and some of those things just included this idea of telling the story in a magical theatrical way, both where theater can make something seamless and beautiful and hide all the things that are required to make something happen, like magic, or it can reveal what happens in the theater, like choosing to change a costume on stage while you're telling a story, or in between scenes, and actually highlighting that and saying, we are embracing this way of storytelling. And so I presented those sorts of ideas of ways of embracing the devices of the theater to tell this particular story. And we would talk about the space itself. We had about 10 locations to solve in a very small space. And I'm going to let Laura talk to you about that. But let me introduce you to our a couple of our designers. I've asked our set designer, Laura Love, and our costume designer, Rachel Finley, to join us today, because they're the places where we are in the process that we can actually show you some images and the process. I also want to mention Brian Miller in absentia, because he's done so much, and you'll get to see a little bit of where we are on the set in just a moment. Let me just tell you a little bit about these people. Laura Love has been a scenic and costume designer in the Rocky Mountain region for almost 40 years. She's designed at places such as the Arvada Center, Family Theater Company, Vintage Theater, Aurora Fox, and she recently retired as the costume and scenic faculty from Metropolitan State University of Denver. And we are glad to and honored to have her working with us. Rachel Finley has been a costume designer for 8 years in the Denver area after having a career as an actor in New York City and Denver. She's designed for Firehouse and Vintage and Bug Theater, Family Theater Company, and Colorado Christian University, et cetera, et cetera. And then Brian Miller, who isn't with us today, but is so with us in so many ways, including the slide show we're about to show you. He's a jack of all trades for Sisters-in-Law. He's the technical director, and he's in charge of realizing mostly the set design, into the actual set, and helping to incorporate the lighting design and facilitate the sound design as well. Brian primarily works as a scenic and lighting designer at theaters including Vintage Theater, Firehouse, Open Stage, and Bob Blue in Fort Collins, and Theater 29 in Denver. He also created this slide presentation that is coming at you right now.
Thanks, Amy. So the job of the costume designer is to create the world the characters inhabit in a way that enhances the telling of the story. Because this play is about real people and real places, my first step after reading the script and meeting with Amy to discuss her ideas was to find research images for locations in the play. Amy and I agreed that the Supreme Court needed to be present throughout the show. We also have scenes in the robing room and in the judges' chambers. The wormwood paneling and modern artwork in this image gave me some strong elements to use for Ruth's area of the stage, while the iconic mid-century modern architecture and Southwestern art of Sandra's house in Arizona gave me the basis for her area of the stage. With these elements in mind, I needed to figure out how to fit them into the intimate space of John Hand Theater. This is a ground plan view of the entire stage area. And then we'll see a photo of the empty theater space. Amy and I had discussed having the Supreme Court area upstage or towards the back of the playing area, and an area for Ruth's home and office on the left side of the stage as viewed from the audience, and an area for Sandra's home and office on the right side of the stage. So then I put that into a basic ground plan. So this is a ground plan view of those basic ideas, and created a simplified perspective view with a computer-aided drafting program. I used this base perspective view then to create storyboard sketches for most of the scenes in the play, showing how different furniture pieces could be used quickly to move between the 10 different locations called for in the script. Once these preliminary sketches were approved, I built a scale model of the set to better illustrate how the space worked in 3 dimensions and to give Amy a tool for blocking and planning transitions. The construction of the set is now well underway to be ready for technical rehearsals and opening night. Here's a sneak peek of a few pieces that are in progress: the facade of the Supreme Court bench and some of the columns for the Supreme Court. So that's where we are.
All right, my turn. So the job of the costume designer when designing a play about real historical figures is to create costumes that emulate but not imitate. I want to make sure the audience identifies and recognizes these characters as real people that existed, but I don't want to exactly recreate every outfit. So like Laura, my first step was to find research images to understand the 2 characters' styles. When you look at Ruth in these photos, you can see that she is professional, but also very fashionable. She's from the East Coast and exhibits this through bold colors, high-end items, and sleek silhouettes. And although we don't see the signature items we associate with her as like black glasses and the Hermes scarves in every photo, we are sure to include these in the costumes as it's something the audience will expect. Sandra is more conservative than Ruth. She's from the South. She tends to have more traditional and ladylike in her fashion. She tends to choose more subtle and calming colors, and she opted for the lace jabot over her robes. And you can see her hairstyle pretty much remains the same for her whole life. The next part of my job is to create a costume plot. The first part of my costume plot breaks down the show scene by scene, describing the time period, setting, and what each character in the scene should be wearing. It will also flesh out how we will change the costumes between scenes or even during scenes, and it identifies which changes might require others to help the actors. This usually starts with the most complicated plan and gets simplified as we discover the flow of the show through rehearsal. This may also include hair and makeup suggestions, the questions that I need answered by the actors, the other designers, or the director. The next part of my plot is a paragraph or more on each character, including my general thoughts on their style, what colors I would like to see them in, what unique challenges the character might present, and anything specific I would like to highlight about them. And then I conclude this section with my general costume themes and thoughts on the show and what I hope to convey and capture through the costumes, and how the costumes can help the actors and the show progress and tell the story. The last part of my plot is a list of every item we need for each character. This helps me track what I need to find or create for each actor. Most people think that a show with only 2 characters would be easy to costume or would have very little to find. But with this show, I will end up with 75 to 100 pieces by the time we hit Tech Week. This will include shoes, jewelry, and any accessories you see on stage, and sometimes pieces the actors don't even wear, but they'll still needed to set the scene. Now, on the next few slides, you'll see some of the marketing material we've created. So I needed to create costumes for a photo shoot before rehearsals even started. But as you can see in these outfits we've put our actors in, you can see the inspiration from the research photos. The colors and the designs of their suits kind of emulate the colors and the style from historical figures. And then you can see Ruth's iconic collar and Sandra's lace jabot when they're in their robes. Now, it is easy to recreate some things. We have all seen these photos of Ruth working out. We recognize her sweatshirt, her glasses, the weights. We have a ton of research photos for those. However, things like Sandra golfing, the next slide, are very difficult to find. Sometimes you just don't find pictures of these. So instead of trying to create something that we see of her, I actually researched what women were wearing in the 1990s when they went golfing, and I came up with this outfit. At the moment, I am finalizing the last few pieces for the show. This weekend, we're gonna have our first fitting, so Amy and I can look at what I've pulled and narrow down what we want the actresses to wear. And then next week, we will have what's called a costume parade, where we finalize everything that will be worn for Tech Week and performances. And in order for you guys to see those, we need you to please come see our show.
Great. Thank you. So strangely enough, and this has probably more to do with economics than anything else, but usually the last additions to the production team are the cast. And ideally, it would be great if we had the cast around the same time we hired our designers, and the designers, got to be part of rehearsal process and respond to what was happening, and things would be changing throughout. But by the time actors come on, and most of the decisions about the set and some of the decisions about the costumes have already been made. But I would like to introduce you to our Ruth and Sandra now. So Lee Massaro is our Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is an actor, director, acting teacher, and executive coach who has worked at most of the major theaters in the Denver area. She was born and raised in New York and hails from real Brooklyn stock and feels a real connection to Ruth. Sally Knudsen began her acting career in Nebraska, and like Sandra, Sally was raised in rural America in a farming and ranching community. She has lived and worked in the Denver area for the last 10 years and has performed in film, stage, as a professional storyteller and puppeteer. We would like to share a cutting from the play, which is currently in rehearsal. We are just starting what I call the working rehearsals. So we have done that table work that I spoke of, and we get impulses going, and we use those impulses to block the play to actually stage the show and figure out where people move and what they're doing in each scene. And today we've started to kind of put the details together inside of each scene, stopping and starting. And this is where I can actually bug the actors, like I like to bug Jonathan with questions. I get to stop and ask questions while we're doing the work, and that's kind of where we are. So I'm going to read some stage directions. I'm going to turn my camera off and share with you just an in-process reading of scenes 6 and 7, and afterwards we will start the. I'll reintroduce Diane to you, and we'll start the question and answer period. So I will see you on the other side.
Amy, you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please, to give the directions.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. I will say that again. Scene 6, robing room of the Supreme Court, moments after the last scene. Before the dialogue begins, Sandra and Ruth remove their robes and put them back on the hooks. Ruth is pleased with how the argument went. Sandra is not.
I hope you don't think Justice Scalia agrees with you.
He seems to.
He was just showing off. He'd never vote to expand the law of gender discrimination. He'd get sued too often.
Well, that's progress. You concede the men here are guilty of gender discrimination. I wonder what you're more afraid of. Alienating conservative men or women?
What do you mean?
The hardest fights are with your own people. Believe me, working in the women's movement, I saw it firsthand. Betty's side fought with Gloria's side. Straights had issues with lesbians. White women versus women of color. Privilege versus poverty. This wave versus that wave. Oi. The point is, I know how hard this is for you.
Why do all New Yorkers sound like therapists? Ruth, look, I want to understand your position. I really do. Explain it to me. What you want is equality. Is that it? Equal treatment for everybody.
Exactly.
Well, that's just silly. Equality would mean that the boss could bully the woman as much as he wanted to, as long as he bullied the men in the same way. That's what you want? Equal bullying for all? Where is that in the Constitution?
The 14th Amendment. Maybe not exactly in those words. When I was at Columbia, they wanted to fire 26 janitors, all women. I wrote the college president and asked, how is this fair? There are more men janitors than women. He said, because men are their family's breadwinners. Where is that in the Constitution?
So you got men fired too. Congratulations.
In the end, the school decided not to fire anyone. Never underestimate the power of guilt. What I want in the Harris case, what I want in every case, is for women and men all to be treated with equal dignity and respect at home and at work.
Then you're in the wrong business. You should be writing fiction, not legal opinions.
Tell me that after you've read my opinion in this case.
You?
I'm an expert in this area. The expert, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Chief Justice assigns the writing of opinions to justices with special expertise, which I happen to have.
Ruth, you'll fit right in here. The court is full of big egos. The building was designed by Mussolini's architect, for goodness sake. I always just figured it was male egos.
I'm not aware that you've ever been accused of humility.
Nobody gets here being humble. We get here by pretending to be humble.
Scene 7. Stage left, Bellhaven Country Club Golf Course, Washington, D.C. Sandra dons a golf hat and grabs a driver. She's playing a round of golf with John. Stage right, the Ginsburg residence, Washington, D.C. Ruth stands in the kitchen, sipping from a glass of wine and talking to Marty as he cooks dinner.
So then, after the oral arguments, we debated the case. Don't ask me what the vote was, Marty. You know I can't tell you, it's secret. But just between us, everyone voted the way you'd expect. What are you making? It smells wonderful.
Good shot, John.
Sandra? What can I say? She's a politician. She wants to be liked. She favors gender equality, but she doesn't want to upset her fellow conservatives. So she takes it one case at a time. No consistency. God only knows where she'll end up.
I don't mind that she's a feminist, whatever that term even means anymore. What I resent is how she sees everything through the gender issue, then makes it worse by treating women like we're a bunch of weaklings who can't handle a little insult here and there.
Of course, the Chief Justice will decide who writes the opinion. He's going to want the best person. I just happen to be the most qualified.
Nice putt, John.
We could be on the verge of real equality. My draft is coming together beautifully. Why shouldn't it? I've spent my entire life preparing to write it. Of course, I hadn't intended to make a big splash so soon in my tenure, but life is all about timing. I happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Just as Sandra is about to swing, a thought occurs to her.
John, did I tell you? The chief asked me to write the opinion in the Harris case. Good shot, Sandra.
And scene. Thank you, actors. I just want to let you all know that we will be opening, as long as everything goes okay, September 25th, and the show runs through October 31st. So to see the end product, Diane will tell you how to get tickets, and we'll move on to question and answer.
Okay. I want to take one moment first because there's someone I didn't thank when I mentioned our sponsors. There are two people who really are responsible in great part for this series. That's Jessica Brown and Gregory Kerwin of Gibson Dunn Law Firm. So I would be remiss if I didn't give them a big thanks. Now, with respect to questions, well, we don't have too many, but one is, it says it looks like the new City Park golf course Sandra was playing at. Is that correct? Yes, that's where we shot a publicity shot for Sandra Day O'Connor, at that golf course. And the head pro gave us permission, and she's a big fan of this play. The other question we have is one, we talked about how the play began and how Jonathan got involved, but we didn't mention how the play ever got to Denver. And why is it that now in Denver, we're the only theater where you can see this play, from my best understanding, until it opens sometime off Broadway next year? And that's a short story, but 2 years ago, I was producing a workshop of Dancing with Giants starring Tova Feldsha. This was her brother's play. He's a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and we were doing some refinement of the script there. And she laughed when I wrote into her contract and said that she was not allowed to take any other job while she was doing our 4-day workshop. She said she never missed anything. And then lo and behold, she got cast in Sisters-in-Law, and she had to tell them that she couldn't do that role unless she could do this workshop and be let off. And that was right before the opening of that play. And of course, they said yes. She did our workshop, and then I flew out to see Sisters-in-Law after that. And when I saw it, I knew that I wanted that to be my next project. I thought it was an important play because here we see two incredible role models who come from completely different backgrounds with completely different political philosophies, who overcome barriers in their careers and rise to become Supreme Court justices. And still, they don't see eye to eye on how to affect change, but somehow they find common ground and become sisters in law. And they do it civilly. And I thought that was an incredible lesson, especially for our youth today, to see something like this. And I'd hoped to have student matinees, but right now, because of the pandemic, we can't. But perhaps sometime in the future, we'll be able to remount the show and then have those student matinees. And I hope that this is an incredible civics lesson someday for students all over the country. So we have another question here. It says, during the table work, does the playwright sometimes change the dialogue or other details? Also, were there any changes made to the play after Ginsburg's death? I can answer that, but I'm going to let our director answer that. Amy, can you come back on for a second?
I am here. The short answer is yes. Jonathan was very generous with rewrites and accommodations as questions were asked in the table work. Sometimes those questions came from the actors that they had, or if they were having issues with just things coming out in a natural way, he would accommodate them, but also to solve some inconsistencies sometimes and things like that that would come up. But extremely generous, and some of the changes are quite painful. It's like cutting off a finger sometimes. They are these stories and the things that you fall in love with while you're writing, that sometimes to find that piece of art inside of the clay, you have to sculpt things away, and that became the task during the table work.
I would also say that when we first read the script, before RBG had passed away, it was almost celebratory in nature. And when we read it again, after she had passed away, it was more poignant, I think. I think because we realized that both of these icons were not on the bench anymore, and there was a sense of loss. And yes, I would say that Jonathan has considered that in updating the play, and he's handled it in a unique way that you'd have to see to understand. If you want to jump in on that, Amy.
Yeah, that was actually the first question that that I spoke to Jonathan about. Was, you know, the first draft was, you know, prior to Ruth passing away, and while he didn't want to write anything that went all the way up to that point, the changes that he made gave it a sense of legacy, and it also creates a very different dynamic between the audience and the characters, where the audience is, you know, 6 years now in the future and knows a whole lot more than the characters do. And that creates its own sense of tension and pathos, knowing that that Ruth has passed. And I don't want to, again, give too much away, but think about where you were and what you thought in 2015 and what you thought was going to happen in 2016 and how the court might look afterwards. And so your experience now, looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, is a part of how you see this play. And that is, I think, the brilliance of what will come in the future with this play.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, artists. Thank you, Elizabeth and Jonathan. And now I want to send it back to Alan for a final wrap-up.
Thank you, Diane. And just again, on behalf of Tattered Cover, thank you for the partnership. Thank you for putting this series together. We are so thrilled. And this has been a great first inaugural episode of this webinar series. We're so grateful to all the artists that have been a part of this, to Elizabeth, to Jonathan, to Amy, to Laura, to Rachel, to Sally, and to Lee, and everyone else involved in the production. Thank you all for giving time this evening. On behalf of Tattered Cover, we really appreciate the attendance tonight from everybody. We had a great crowd, great questions as well. Want to remind everyone to go to, and the links are in the chat below, tatteredcover.com/sisters-law to get more information about our future episodes in this series. You can also get a link to purchase tickets for the play or purchase the book. And again, I want to plug our next episode of this series, Monday, September 13. We'll be speaking about the personal relationships between the two justices with people who knew them very well, including Justice Ruth McGregor from the Arizona Supreme Court, the author of the book Sisters-in-Law, Linda Hirschman, and our very own Attorney General, Phil Weiser, who of course clerked for Ruth Bader Ginsburg in his early legal career. That panel will be moderated by a good friend of Tattered Cover and a good advocate in our community, Scott Levin from the ADL. And again, that will be back on Zoom. Registration details are on the webpage that we have linked. Again, we are very excited for future episodes of the series. Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a good evening. Thank you all.